Hi there folks, my name's Novawing24 and welcome to another little review of an X-Plane product. So we're here today having a look at the Just Flight Piper Arrow PA28R Arrow III. Now this has come out a little while ago, but they have recently done some updates to it, so I thought it was a good chance to actually sort of go through with some updates that have happened to X-Plane, some updates to the aircraft. Let's have a go back and have another good look at it, especially for me because it's a great aircraft because I've got this now across like all the sort of major platforms now, and I thoroughly enjoyed. I absolutely love flying it in Flight Sim World. I really, really did. So I really want to see if I'm going to have as much fun flying with X-Plane. Now, of course, X-Plane. I am still very much sort of getting into X-Plane, and I'm really enjoying my time in the platform so far, and it's going to be really interesting taking this aircraft up for a spin. Now, normally we would go through and do a lot of detailed sort of look at the exterior model before we get and then go in for our test flight, but we're going to do it slightly differently today. We're going to get sort of more straight into the actual flying part, and then we're going to have a look at a more detailed look at the exterior model once we get in the air. Now we're going to be doing a little bit of a test flight. So we're actually doing the flight out of the manual this time. So Just Flight always do a familiarization flight in all their manuals that sort of guide you through, and we're going to be doing that exact one today. So we're going to be here, going from Echo Golf Hotel Alpha through to Echo Golf Kilo Alpha today. So just for a bit of fun, something different, just to we're going to test the manual. We'll go from the stuff that we're going to go through, work through our checklist, get our aircraft set up, and then get ourselves underway. So without any further ado, let's do that. Now, of course, for those who are familiar with Just Flight aircraft, you would recognize this little slide out window here, where they do a lot of their sort of extra features and whatever. Now, it's really important for some things in, especially in X-Plane as well. So for example, the opening and closing the baggage door at the rear of the aircraft pretty much can only be done from this manual here. A couple of quick ones to go through as we work through the top one here. So obviously this one here is the passenger door. This is the main crew entry and exit. You can do that from inside the aircraft. You don't need to do it from here, but you can do it from inside the aircraft, and we'll do it from inside the aircraft in a moment. This button here pops up the sort of inbuilt X-Plane 530, which is sort of just as part of that one, so you can sort of do that. That's just fine. There we go. Make that disappear again. These ones here we'll get into more of these as we'll get into the aircraft. So let's without any further ado, let's do just that now. So so this one here changes. So you can see the windscreen is kind of dirty, kind of marked as you would expect to see from a real aircraft. But if you don't want that and you want to have a nice crystal clear view, you can click that button and it will sort of remove all of the dirt smudges from your glass. But as I always like this kind of stuff because it makes it feel like an actual sort of aircraft, an actual sort of the way it actually feels and stuff like that. Now this one here controls the actual reflections on the front of the glass instrumentation. So with it on, you actually sort of get reflections of other parts of the aircraft and the outside weather. Turned off, you just see the gauges straight away, so nice and clear again. Again, I like this kind of attention to detail. It showcases some of the really cool stuff and how they've actually really taken advantage of the actual X-Plane 11 engine. Because I think without a doubt at the moment, the graphic engine that driving X-Plane 11 is pretty much second to none when it comes to the open world flight simulator, the flight sims at the moment. I mean, DCS World is pretty amazing, but it's very limited with this area. This is of the global capable sims. This is very much the one to go with. So we've got this one here which controls your internal cabin light, but of course we've got our electrics off at the moment, so that doesn't work. This one here is a pop-up for the Autopilot. So the Autopilot is a very, very basic autopilot, and we'll be using a bit of it a little bit later on. Essentially very much an autopilot sort of heading hold, nav hold, and that's pretty much it. There's not a great deal to it. This one here actually will set up whether your gauges are going to be in inches or your pressure is going to be in inches or millibars. Now I normally run in millibars because I normally work in airspace, which is that's what it's done in. This one here, the auto fuel switch. Now this is interesting. So the Piper Arrow doesn't actually have, it's got left and right fuel tanks, but you have to manually switch between them to keep the aircraft straight and level, because to burn from one or the other. There's no crossfeed, none of this fancy crossfeed nonsense. Now, if you want to take the stress, the workload out of it, you can enable this, which will enable the sort of the aircraft to automatically drain from both tanks nice and evenly. Otherwise, you can leave this off as you would in the real aircraft, and you actually turn it yourself. So, for all those things, I actually don't mind leaving on and sort of doing myself. This one here is one of their nifty little gauges, and actually shows off some of the cool features that they've actually modeled in this one. So this allows you to see, like, check your fuel. So if you didn't want to read the gauges, which are behind the control column there. So you've got your fuel gauges there, but you can actually sort of jump on here and see what it is and see where the imbalance is. It also allows you to refill your fuel if you need to, and you can recharge the battery voltages if you need to as well. Now this also shows off your actual sort of simulate spark plug and vapor lock. So you can turn this on or off. By default it's off, and then you can turn it on, so it actually gives you, so you actually have to look after your engine, make sure you lean your mixture and keep your throttles high and stuff like that while you're actually on the ground. Otherwise you can actually fail your spark plugs and vapor lock the aircraft. So really cool, really well modeled. I remember the first time I sort of jumped into this as doing a bit of a test flight for it. I was suddenly, why is my engine suddenly stopped while I'm just sitting here on the ground? Full fuel, nothing else. Look at my spark plugs were fully floured. And it's like, you know what? Again, one of those great things, we've seen it modeled in a great deal of detail in something like the A2A products. And it's great to see these kind of ones where they can actually sort of, you can use a step towards those, step towards you. If you want to make your sim more realistic, you can do that. But you can also turn it off if you just want a more easier flying experience. Alright, so that's that one there. Next one is the weight and balance. So weight and balance, I'm sort of mixed feelings about how they've done this one here. Like, this is interesting, like, you know, they've got some performance charts and stuff like that. Shows you where your fuel tanks are. You can do a quick sort of full or half of your amount of fuel. But it doesn't have any interactivity with the passengers and center gravity and things like that here, which is a little frustrating. I've kind of expected a little bit more than that, because I know in other aircraft they've done that, so it's sort of like, yeah, you could have done a bit more with that one, guys. But still, you know, it gives you a performance chart, it gives the information that you need, so it is what it is. Alright, next one along here is the volume. So this is actually sort of where you can actually interact with not only the volume of the sim, but actually certain sounds that are done outside of their core sim and driven by the aircraft itself, including the gyroscopes and the pumps, and actually things like you can actually adjust the volumes of those. So this is just, there are some sounds which are driven by the aircraft itself from Just Flight, and these allows you to control those individual sounds separate from the ones actually in the core sim. Alright, so this one here allows you to sort of start to get the aircraft quick started. This one here allows you to access all the checklists. Now again, like we've seen with these pretty standard checklists that we see from Just Flight, where you can actually go through. Some of them you can make dynamic, so you can actually it'll actually sort of do things as you actually go through the actual aircraft. It'll sort of tick them off on the way. Other ones you have to actually sort of manually change them yourself, so it's completely up to you which one you use. Interestingly enough, the couple of the ones actually sort of have issues, because things like where it says turn avionics on. There's no actual avionics button on this one. It's just, they're either on, it's either the battery's on or the battery's off, this kind of thing. So a couple of those things, it seems like they've sort of get this fairly generic checklist and just dropped it in. So, which is, it's still been customized and still actually thing to actually sort of do the actual profiles of the aircraft. Just a couple of the things are in there, just not quite right. But as I said, overall, not too bad. I still prefer the way Flight Sim World implements its checklist. I do still prefer that. I do prefer that as a methodology. Anyway, alright, okay, so that one closed. Next one here is a flight computer. This is a basic flight computer like you would have in the real aircraft. Well, actually, it gives you some information about your outside air temperature, your current ground speed, estimates an endurance, range, and actual fuel burn and fuel consumption. So, some kind of cool, kind of interesting stuff that you can really help you when you're actually flying. Finally here, you've got your access to your standard X-Plane logbook. This one here now in others, in the ESP sims, it sort of engages like a quasi-slew mode, whereas here it actually engages the actual pushback ground service stuff, the default X-Plane ground handling stuff, which is kind of cool, kind of doesn't always work at a lot of the small airports and stuff like that, but sort of does override it. And finally, this is sort of like the wheel downs, tie downs shocks. So this is something that we saw sort of just when we were quickly jump back to the exterior view. So you can sort of see you got your shocks and your tie downs. Now, you can leave this set on all the time because it still requires certain conditions to be met before they appear, such as parking brake on, engines off, stuff like that. So you still get the advantage of actually sort of you can leave them turned on, but they won't always show because it still has to meet a whole heap of conditions. Right, that's enough of me waffling on. Let's get ourselves pre-flighted and let's get ourselves into the air. Alrighty, so here we are. Let's get ourselves underway, and then, as I said, once we're underway, we'll have a look a bit more at the exterior. But well, we will take a chance to have a look at the interior. And again, like we've seen before, as I sort of saw, we saw those beautiful reflections, which you can turn off if you so desire. But I really like I just like the fact that it's got that used and sort of very. It's a loved aeroplane, kind of thing. And it is, the Arrow, as I've said before. It's one of those great aircraft that's just been perennially in our skies, and it's just, because it just keeps going and going and going, as it were. It really does, and does come out in all sorts of variations. But anyway, in the meantime, let us get ourselves underway. So first of all, we want to shut this door here. So we're going to bring that one in. Yep. Sometimes the door animation can be a little finicky. There we go. Okay. Done. And wait for my truck out and not freak out. Let's try that again. Latch that one. There we go. Okay. Alright, with that now secured, let us get ourselves started for our flight. So we're gonna hide this one just to make things a little easier for us. Alright. So first things first. Alright, let's bring up our checklist here. Hide that one. Alright, so engine start will turn on as a dynamic checklist. Alright, so first things first. Open up the throttles. Awesome. Alright, now we're going to put our alternator switch to on. Battery master switch on, fuel pump on, fuel balancing check, excellent, yep, okay, fuel mixture rich and then off, okay, propeller clear, alright, let's try that one again. That would help if I actually set the fuel on. That might be a good start. Forgot that part. There we go. Fuel pump, and now we've got the fuel pressure going on. That would help. Okay, let's try this again, shall we? Alright. Okay, one more time for luck. There we go. Pressure's building. Oil pressure in the green. Through its throttle range. Excellent. Alrighty, there we go. Got our checklist out of the way. Okay, now next thing is we need to get ourselves a flight going on. So we've got now I do have the nav radios. We've got the GPS course there, but we've actually got my nav radio set up. We're going to do some bit of a nav flying today. So we're going to be heading out via the SAM VOR. We're going to head out there first, so I've got the frequency for that one dialed in, and after that we're going to go through the GWC VOR as well. So we've got all those dialed in, ready to go. Let ourselves taxi out onto our runway. Let's have a look at the windsock. I think we've still got winds coming in from the south, I think, but it's fairly slow. Looks like it's coming in from about, I'm just checking out my little nav chart on the side here. Looks like I've got winds coming in from about 180. So it looks like we're going to be taking out from 26 today. So we'll do brakes off, start our taxiing down, keep the mixture down low a little bit just while we taxi till we don't do anything silly with our aircraft and our fuel. So we'll taxi down. Yeah, wind's coming in from the south from that windsock, so we shall taxi down. We'll do a taxi. We'll take off down on 26. Oh, it's pretty much a straight crosswind coming from here. Taxi down. The sound set is quite nice as well for this aircraft as well. It's done really, really well. I just realised that I was very, very naughty and I didn't actually turn my anti-collision lights on and my beacon on to let people know that I was starting the aircraft. I do apologise for that. But we shall... it's alright. Fortunately, we're in a sim. We've got our DME turned on, so we'll know how far we're going to be travelling. Okay, good. Now the other prep we're going to do is make sure that our autopilot is set to nav 1, because we will be using that once we get into the air. Do our 1 notch of flaps ready for takeoff. One of the things that I often find very interesting about a lot of flight simulation aircraft is that they often do not behave well on the ground. Particularly, I've found that in X-Plane, so some of the X-Plane ground physics have been rather entertaining over the years. But I must admit that so far these ones have been pretty good so far. I must find that this aircraft, like, it just feels like it behaves correctly, and I'm very happy with it, especially considering that, as I said, I've had a chance to play with this aircraft and fly this aircraft in the ESP platforms, and it's nice being able to bring it across the X-Plane platform and find that it does do quite well. But as I said, let's get ourselves our takeoff roll. So as I said, we are flying through the south of England today, going through, and it looks like we've got some beautiful English weather to sort of join us on our trip. Going to be keeping it around about 5,000 feet, 5,500 feet today, as we head eastwards. Stop here. Just do check our engine, bring up the RPMs, check our magnetos. Yep. Correct drop that we expect to see. Excellent. No issues on the engines. Throttle performance, excellent. Alright, sounding good. Alright, I think we are time ready for our takeoff. Let's taxi out onto the runway. Sometimes nice actually taking off from grass strips. It's a little bit different as well, and that's one thing that they have actually modelled. They have modelled the fact that it does take a bit more resistance to actually take off from a grass runway. Bit of right rudder in on the takeoff roll there. We're dancing a little bit. Back cleanly on the stick. Gear travelling. Flaps up. Nice clean climb here. About 78 knots or so, 78, 80 knots is about our best climb speed. I must say that the performance handling is very, very nice, and I think it is slightly better than what I've experienced with it on the ESP platforms. It definitely feels a bit cleaner in the air. The ground handling, as I said, is definitely quite nice as well, not as squirrely as I've experienced in other aircraft and in other sims as well. So I guess some of the advantages of using, like, as I said, X-Plane is it's a sim that's had a long history behind it, and it's definitely come a long way as it's moved forward into the future. Move on towards our heading here. I have preloaded into the GPS as well as being able to follow the nav course as well. But yeah, this aircraft in X-Plane does not have a follow the GPS thing. So you do sort of get to, as I said, it does have the autopilot and get it to follow the nav, which we will do, because we've picked up the DME, I think. Not quite, haven't quite picked up the DME. Getting there. So I think it's in the wrong setting to see showing the DME. It's this one. There we go. Yep. So we've got the DME. 30 nautical miles to our next waypoint. Getting ourselves up to our cruise altitude. It's going to be a bit murky. Probably typical English weather. A bit murky today. That one. All right. Okay. The other interesting thing is that it definitely does sort of some of the magnetic variations and things on the gear, on the cockpit instruments. They seem to be a lot more alive than, shall we say, in the ESP platforms. The ESP platforms doesn't sort of have as much of the gyro drift and things like that, whereas very much so you see it a lot more in sort of in X-plane, where you do have to sort of compensate. You do have to monitor your gauges a lot more as well. Oh, there's a little bit of drift there. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're coming up on our altitude. We're going to as we get up to our cruise, I'll set it onto some nav. So behind that one, just to make things a bit easier. So we're going to enable the autopilot, and we're going to turn that onto nav. So that should now, it's captured the nav, and it'll now follow the nav frequency, which hopefully, if I've dialed all that in correctly, should bring us to where we're heading off to. Alright. We're just sort of coming up on our altitude now. Trim the aircraft back down, wind the throttle back a little bit. Okay. So let's mix back a little bit. Prop back a little bit. Get ourselves into our cruise. So there's no altitude hold in this aircraft. You do have to sort of do your pitch manually. It will do the heading and the nav hold for your nav 1. Now interestingly, with the nav 1, so the nav 1's driven by the 530, the GNS 530, but nav 2 and com 2 are driven by the old steam gauges over here on the right. So something to be aware of when you are, if you are doing your navigation. So I do have the second frequency dialed in here on our nav 2. So that's going to be for when we go to our second VOR. From that one, we'll be moving on to that one there. Do my transponder on. That would be a good idea. Alright, so there we go. We'll let our speed increase. So one of the good thing about the GPS, of course, you can use that to sort of calibrate your course and calibrate your instruments as well. Just in case it's not, it gives me a little reminder there to make sure that it lets me know that, hey, it's a little bit off, you might want to fix that. Right, there we go. And looks like we're good. Okay, so now that we're just about established in our cruise, we're a little bit high on our altitude. Got that down a bit. So now we'll take an opportunity to have a quick look at the outside of the aircraft, and so we'll have a bit more of that finer details and see some of the beautiful eye candy that X-Plane 11 can really give us, even though it is a rather miserable old day out there. So here we are on the outside of the Arrow. Now, it's the outside model externally is pretty much the same as we've seen in the ESP platforms. The external model is very much the same. We've seen the animation when we're on the ground of the passenger door opening and the cargo door opening. Now, the oil system though, which in the ESP platform version, the oil sort of fill valve at the top there does open, and when you're doing some of the features of the oil system, that is not modeled here. The failure of the oil system is modeled, but the oil burn though is not very well modeled, and the oil opening and refilling, that is not modeled in this aircraft. It's one of those details that's just it's there on the ESP one, but it's not on the X-Plane one, which I was actually surprised at. I was expecting to see it on the X-Plane version as well. Beyond that, though, the thing that I must say is that the 3D model, as I said, is much the same. There's no real difference with that, but the texturing, the detail of the texturing, and the way the texture actually reacts with the external lighting, as we sort of see as we're reflections that we're sort of seeing as we go around the back of the aircraft here, that is absolutely outstanding, and that's something that you really, and that's where you really can see that it's taking advantage of the X-Plane 11 sort of PBR far more than it does in a flight sim world or in the ESP platform. So it's very graphically and visually, it is very much a more stunning representation of the aircraft in X-Plane. Flight characteristic handling wise, it feels pretty good as well, especially that takeoff roll, so they haven't put in, reading the flight notes, putting that bit of extra rudder in there for the takeoff roll. Definitely feels like they've got that right. But in terms, as I said, just a couple of niggly little things that are just, maybe just, not, probably more limitations of the sim rather than the model that come in. They're not there. The other thing that was interesting that I kind of really appreciated in the Flight Sim World version, which is missing from, at the very least it's missing from the X-Plane version, and I'm pretty sure it's also missing from the FSX version as well, is the fact that it's a lack of dynamic passenger appearances. So something that we see in A2A, some A2A aircraft, and we saw in the Flight Sim World version of the Arrow, was the fact that when you put passenger weights in, so for example, I'm supposed to have somebody in the right-hand seat at the moment. In Flight Sim World, when I did that, they were actually modeled. They actually put a person, you got a model of a 3D person in there when you look at external view. But in X-Plane version, and I'm reasonably sure in the ESP version, and the FSX version, it's not modeled there, which is just an interesting sort of. It's not a comment on Just Flight. It's really not. It's more a comment on the core sim. I suppose there's a little bit of a comment on Just Flight as well. It's interesting to notice some of the differences in the core sim as well. But don't get me wrong, Flight Sim World has some issues as well when it comes to people showing people, especially multiplayer. But as I said, just something interesting that I really did note as part of this one while going through here. Otherwise, as I said, the 3D modelling is still very, very beautiful. The in-house team at Just Flight did an amazing job with this, and they've done the conversion team bringing it across to X-Plane and just did an incredible job with the reflections and the physically based rendering of the lighting system. It's just really nice, and it looks absolutely incredible at night as well, with the lights actually reflecting down along the aircraft. It looks absolutely amazing. It really does. So there you go. Alrighty, well, that's pretty much, as I said, this is very much not an aerobatic aircraft, very much not, and in that way they've modelled it very well. It does not do, it handles stalls not too badly because it is a relatively docile aeroplane, but it does not do aerobatics, it does not do turns, it does not do rolls in any way, shape or form. You will become a grease spot on the ground unless you have got a lot of height for clearance, just FYI. But in terms of like running around as like a bit of a touring aircraft, it's pretty good. And as I said, it's very impressive seeing the in-house team from Just Flight actually sort of take this aircraft and put it now into what are we talking now? We're talking sort of the ESP family of sims. They've brought it into Prepared V4 as well with its challenges and its changes. They've also brought it into Flight Sim World and now bringing it to X-Plane. It really shows there's a core of really talented developers there that are working on this, and a lot of partnerships in the industry to look after us as the flight simulation community going into the future. So yes, I'm enjoying it more. There are more positives with this than there are negatives, that's for sure. Alrighty, as I said, I'm going to do my little navigation exercises are coming up. I'm on a few miles away from the first VOR. I'm going to get some turn into that one. So it's funny enough, we'll probably cut that video over. We'll cut the video over to where we can actually look into. We'll see that kick in about 10 miles away at the moment. So we'll rejoin the video in a couple of miles. We'll actually switch over the nav and actually move on to the next VOR. Alright, so as you can see, we're just about on top of our next waypoint, so we're going to, now as I said, I've got my next VOR tuned in, so 114.75, got that one tuned in into my nav 2, so what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the thing to get that onto course, and that looks about right. Yep, there we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are now going to, as we're almost there, we're going to quickly hide this one just to make life a bit easier. We're going to, this switch down here, we're going to switch that down to nav 2. Now in theory, the aircraft should now do a slight course adjustment and move on to nav 2. Yes, there we go, it's captured the nav 2. We'll flick our DME over to nav 2 as well. We are now heading out onto our course to head on to the next VOR. So as I said, it's nice, as I said, it was an interesting little test to actually see, because, you know, we get so used to, especially those of us who are coming from the ESP platform, and you know, and I know it's kind of a thing of modern aircraft, we get so used to sort of just using GPS and just going, oh, you just follow the prompts with GPS. It's nice to actually know that all the radio nav stuff, it still works, and it's actually modeled correctly in the sim, and it's really well done. So yes, I'm fairly chuffed with that, fairly impressed with that, fairly happy with the way I'm doing things. Alright, no worries. Well, as I said, I'm going to leave that one, and I've realised I've massively gone over my, a few hundred feet over my altitude here. So we're going to drop back down to my 5500, that about 150 feet over here. So we're going to drop back down to that, and otherwise, enjoy, and we'll see you guys. We'll rejoin the video as we come in and approach, and we'll do our landing at our final destination. Alright, so here we are, just passing over the field. We're going to do our cross field. We're going to turn upwind, come in on our landing down there. First notch flaps. Be a bit of a high angle approach this one because of some of these hills nearby. Extend our downwind a little bit. The gear, and you know, that's actually something else that I've noticed, is that the gear descent speed in the X-Plane version seems to be a lot more what it is like in the real aircraft. Just seems to be a little too quick in the Flight Sim world than the ESP versions, whereas the gear retraction, sort of the gear extension and retraction here does take that little bit of extra time, which when I've been flying in the back of one of these things, it definitely felt like it did in the real aircraft. So we'll cut short our base here. Flaps, coming in, turning final. That's a little high on the glide slope. Now, no VREF for this is, in my current configuration, is around about 58 knots. Slope. Displays threshold. A little bit to the left. Throttle idle. Little not quite enough flare, but that's alright. We didn't blow anything, we didn't break anything on the landing, because X-Plane definitely... That's one thing actually that is always kind of entertaining, is when you see things blowing up in X-Plane. Yeah, definitely damage model is far more interesting in X-Plane than it is in the ESP franchise, that is for sure. Right, let's clean up the aircraft as we come into our taxi here. Taxi off to the end of the runway here, and we'll go down and park by one of these hangars down here. Get my final thoughts on this little aircraft. I definitely feel like that one of the things that needs to be captured probably more in all of the simulators, not just X-Plane or Flight Sim World or Prepared or anything else. The idea of the fact that, you know, everybody uses kneeboards these days. Like everybody uses like an iPad or something as a kneeboard. So it's sort of like something that, like the sort of the kneeboard that's sort of been part of flight simulation for years, sort of needs to be updated a little bit to show off the fact that, you know, pilots these days do use more grander things for their kneeboards these days. I'll go a bit further on. Couple of helipads for the helicopter guys. Sounds like a plan. I think. Alright. Get our parking brake on. Alright. Mixture full lean. Oh, fuel off. Alright, PA28, collisions off. Whoop. Did that without the landing light. I didn't follow my checklist completely. Alright. And which will turn you off, 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 and off, and finally battery off. Done. There we go. Okay, all shut down, aircraft all secured. Let's, oh, if my truck guy doesn't want to freak out on me. I don't know what it is. It's something about, it seems to be X-Plane more than anything else. It just seems to be, when I look up here, ugh, that is getting annoying. There we go. Okay, unlatch that. Okay, open up the door. That's all done. There we go. Okay, aircraft secured. Done. Alright, final thoughts. So my final thoughts on this one is that this is a really good, it's a great effort from the Just Flight team to actually bring this aircraft across to X-Plane. I really enjoy that. Now I'm always a little bit biased because I do love the low and slow flying. For me, there's not really much wrong with this. The flight dynamics are the best of the, you know, compared to all three platforms. I have to say that. The ground handling is definitely up there as one of the better ones. in-flight modeling of some of the systems, though, funnily enough, some systems are better than others. So the way they've modeled the vapor lock and the engine and stuff like that. Now that's really good, but other things like the oil system don't seem to be modeled like this one. So it's sort of like it's an interesting segment. Visually, it's probably, I think it is the best of the three, and system-wise, it's it does come in a little bit second to that, but the overall experience is really good. And if you're looking for a really good quality aircraft to add to your sort of GA sort of light hopping sort of aircraft to add to your X-plane system, I think this is one that you would be well advised to consider looking at. So there you go. Alrighty, well, that does wrap up my little review of the Just Flight Piper Arrow PA28R Piper Arrow III. I want to say thank you very much to the wonderful guys over at Just Flight for providing me with a review copy of this aircraft. Don't forget, as always, to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying these videos and want to see more. And of course, as always, you can catch up with me and all the things I'm up to between videos by finding me on Facebook and on Twitter. Just search NovaWing24. Alright, folks, thanks very much for watching. Take care, safe skies to all, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.